just want to start with a short question here,
Sure.
because I've had many comments on my channel regarding this. So, what are your thoughts on the Arrius Piso theory? Have you come across any evidence in your research that Piso was the main composer of the New Testament?
Yeah, I knew or actually had communication with phone calls with Abelard Rushlin. Um, he that's not his real name. He's a Jewish guy. He's passed away. This was like 15 years ago. He and I were, talking on the phone. And I I had looked through his work, his pamphlet, and the number system, and it seemed incomprehensible to me, and I couldn't understand his methodology, how he would get to his conclusions. But the conclusions seemed pretty good. He
Mhm.
seemed to actually understand a lot about the origin of the Gospels, and also how later authors sort of picked up on the Flavian typology and their sense of humor. But I know that he didn't get there from his numerical, methodology. This to me was just clearly crackpot. And I asked him if he had a rabbinical background, his family, in Britain, and he said he did. And I said, "Oh, that makes sense to me." So what happened with him was, as I see it, he was given the traditions basically that were in play in the creation of the Shakespearean literature. So he had some of the conclusions of this analysis presented to him, but he didn't know how they got there. Somehow he had one half of it without, the other, and so he sort of invented this numerologic process to come to the conclusions that he had been presented. I know this is sort of complicated, but this is what the only way I can make any sense out of what he did,
Mhm.
is that he was given the conclusions by the traditions in a British rabbinical family that had been given them by the group that produced the Shakespearean literature,
Mhm.
generations ago. But they didn't actually pass along the methodology of the Flavian typology. So he didn't
Mhm.
have that, but he had the conclusions, and so he came up with a rationale to justify the conclusions that he had. Um, I asked him about it, and I said, "This is how you did it, in my opinion." And he didn't really respond very vigorously. I think I had hit the nail on the head with that. Um, so that's Piso. I mean, then from in that work in Ebler's work, he focuses on the Piso family, and I would say this is at the Pisos as the authors. And I would say this is sort of like, claiming that, I mean, Homer didn't write, the Odyssey. It was someone who looked like him with the same name,
Mhm.
if you see my point.
Yeah.
They don't really know who's who. And, the Romans had so many names for one another. And
Mhm.
um, the genealogies were not really recorded very precisely. You see like a family of Caesars, the Julio Claudians or the Flavians, and you can kind of make sense out of the direct linkages, brother to brother, son, this. But outside of that, the Roman patrician families were very imprecise in recording any of their names and their families, and so that's why when you look at some of the Piso theories, they have these really complicated family structures,
Mhm.
which are generated just out of conjecture, and that's because there wasn't the kind of precise recording of members of families that we would have today, and so to try to get any coherency, you have to sort of fill in the gaps with conjecture. Um, So, I mean, I don't have any contradiction of these theories. I think, I mean, I would say that the numerologic process that Reuchlin presents is crackpot and is actually detrimental to my theory because since I come to some of the same conclusions, I basically am tarred with this brush of well, there's no methodology that comes to these conclusions. You're just fantasizing. You're just like Rousseau,
Mhm.
but actually it's just the opposite. I mean, the Caesar's Messiah theory is the most I mean, uh, kind of presented uh, fact-based theory that one could ever have, in that it simply takes two different texts and lays them side by side and asks the reader to look at the sequence of each. And so it's an inaccurate criticism of Caesar's Messiah. And uh, I kind of asked Rushlin to give up his theory. I said, now that Caesar's Messiah out there, why don't you rewrite your pamphlet? And then I also asked him, because I'd done enough work into like the Shakespearean theory at this point to know where he was coming up with these ideas. And I said, why don't you talk about your family? Why don't you write about that, and where the ideas, how they actually got, how the understanding of the origin of Christianity it was passed along within your rabbinical family. It didn't produce anything. He never wrote anything like that, and he never publicly commented on our exchange. And in fact, I think he was almost a recluse at that point. He reached out to me. I forget how, but we ended up having. He had my phone number, and we had a number of phone conversations. And so anyway, that's like the Piso theory is. As it's related to Rushlin's work, is very unfortunate in that it is founded on a fantasy, the numerologic, you know, concepts, which really don't link or produce any methodology by which you can come to the conclusions that Rushlin did. Um, and but at the same time, other than it's the methodology to to that it presents to like
Yeah.
come to the conclusions, I think the theory is fine. I don't have any contradiction of it. It's I it really, I think it really hurt my sort of ability to get an honest appraisal of the Caesar's Messiah theory, because um, Rushlin had created this sort of widely held understanding in New Testament scholarship of
Mhm.
the theory coming from a crackpot. So I don't really have much to say about it. I think the pamphlet Rushlin brought out speaks for itself. It doesn't really have any methodology that's meaningful.
Yeah. I always thought that even if, I mean, it's possible he was one of the writers, but obviously it was commissioned and managed by the Flavian emperors themselves. I mean, Titus and
Right. I mean,
Vespasian.
well,
That's the
but who
point.
was Piso? I mean,
Yeah.
look into the Piso family, and it's there's some detail,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of cognomens, and this is why there's a guy named who calls himself Roman Piso, and he writes a lot of stuff about the Piso family, and his methodology to identify the members and then to show which one wrote which part of the Gospels and things is really hilarious. It's actually as bad as Abelard Rushland's methodology to use the number series to come to these conclusions.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't support these theories. They have to just you know go on their own if they want
Yeah.
to get pay attention to them.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyway, thank you for answering that question. Again, I had many people asking about